Last but not least, I would like to welcome Mr. Hiromichi Katayama, who is joining, I think, from Paris virtually. And I know that UNESCO and UNIVOC has been monitoring the situation after COVID closely and during COVID. What are the latest development in issues like digitalization and green skills? We would like to hear from you, and then you will comment. You can also introduce the video that we will be watching about the BELT initiative after your intervention. Thank you very much for your presence with us today.
Yes, thank you very much, Ahmed. And thank you very much for inviting UNESCO to this very important meeting. So I'm Hiromichi Katayama. I'm based in UNESCO headquarters in Paris.
الصوت مش واضح.
Sorry, I think. Yeah, I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, so I'm working on TVET. And I want to talk about how UNESCO is to respond to the new laws, digital transformation, and green economies. And, sorry, yes, and the new UNESCO strategy for teachers.
Mr. Hiromichi, can you please distance your voice from the mic for a little bit?
Okay.
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, is it better now?
Yes, thank you, much better.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm going to briefly explain the UNESCO new strategy for TVET. But before that, our colleague, the UNESCO UNIVOC International Centers, they have prepared video recorded presentations to show how UNESCO has introduced.
No, sorry, again, we need to distance your mic a little bit. It's not very clear.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. It's better now?
Yes.
So, yeah,
yes.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the colleague in UNESCO UNIVOC International Center in Bonn, they have prepared the video recorded presentations regarding how UNESCO has introduced and implemented the new qualifications and competencies at the level of the TVET institutions. So first of all, I'd like to show the videos prepared by the project managers of this BELT project, Creating Innovation by Learning TVET, prepared by the UNESCO UNIVOC and also by German Federal Institute for TVET, BLTD. So could you please play the video first, and then I will explain the strategy. Thank you.
نعم لا هو احنا مش يعني احنا خلاص هو لسه مخلص لا okay can you
Esteemed members of the TVET community, esteemed members of
اوكي طب نشغل الفيديو هنتفرج على فيديو كان بعتوه بردك اليونسكو عن مبادرة اسمها البلت. هي مبادرة في أفريقيا وأوروبا وجنوب شرق آسيا. فهيشرحوا لنا بس ايه البروجكت، ولو رجع تاني مستر هيموتشي هنسأله شوية أسئلة.
It's a pleasure to be here with you today at EduTech Egypt 2022. It's a pity that the current circumstances prevent us to be there with you today, enjoying of your company, knowledge, and expertise. My name is Wilson, and I'm the project manager for the BUILD project at UNESCO UNIVOC.
My name is Vera Haag. I'm the project manager for BUILD at the German Federal Institute for VET, BRBB in short, and it's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to present the BUILD project to you today via this video. The BUILD project focuses on UNIVOC centers in Europe, Africa, and Asia. So these are centers that are members of the global UNIVOC network. So, what themes are we working on with BID? We're working on 5 themes. Our overarching project theme and focus is new qualifications and competencies. And within this overarching theme, we look at the so-called 3 I's. So how do we effectively identify new qualifications and competencies? How do we integrate them adequately in curriculum and training regulations? And then thirdly, how do we implement them in TVET training practice? And this overarching topic is underpinned by 4 other themes. Those are digitalization, migration, greening, and entrepreneurship. And for the following 4 project years, we will set the dual transition greening and digitalization as our main focus. So we'll mostly look at those 2 themes, but we won't drop the other 2 themes. They will still remain within the scope of the project.
So the BUILD project is organized along 3 lines of work. And one common element among them is the exchange of knowledge, exchange of best practices between Europe, Africa, and Asia, because we have as a premises that each of the regions have the opportunity to learn and share in the BUILD project. And we do it, as I said, in 3 different ways. The first one is through our bridging line. And the bridging line comprises regional and global conferences about the themes of the BUILD project, namely new qualifications and competences, and for this next 4 years, digitalization, greening, and the dual transition. And we organize 4 of these events every 2 years. The next one will be organized in June in Finland, and you are all invited to take part on it. We also have what we call the innovation line. And the innovation line could be explained as our research line, where we delve into a topic that's pressing for the TVET community. So just as an example, and Vera will be able to explain that a little bit further down the presentation, we have just launched a publication on new qualifications and competencies. And the last and third and newest line is the learning line. It basically could be summed up in turning reflection into action. So what we are basically doing is creating capacity building tools based on the knowledge generated in our innovation line that will benefit TVET institutions across the world.
Okay, so now that you have learned about the broad lines of activities with the BID project, let's look with a bit more detail into each of these lines. First of all, the bridging line. As Wilson has already mentioned, with these bridging lines we have different events. We have, in a time span of 2 years, regional conferences in Europe, Africa, and Asia. And at the end of each of these 2-year cycles, we have a global conference, the BILD Learning Forum, where all 3 participating regions come together. During the past years, of course, due to COVID, we had to carry them out, those events, as fully digital conferences, but we're now slowly moving back to hybrid conferences. What happens during those events? Well, it's all about networking, peer learning, about best practice examples that we're presenting in the BID teams, about panel discussions and learning from each other, creating networks. So what else are we doing within our activity lines? The second line of activity is the so-called innovation line. This line is all about gathering knowledge and creating new knowledge together. So Wilson had mentioned already the work on new qualifications and competencies that we have been doing during the past 2 years. So with an expert group composed of members from Europe, Africa, and Asia, we worked on 3 volumes that all look at the theme of new qualifications and competencies, the identification, the integration, and the implementation of new qualifications and competencies. And why did we produce 3 volumes? Well, that is because each of the volumes looks at the perspective of different stakeholders within the TVET system. So we have a micro level that looks at the theme from the perspective of TVET providers. We have a meso level with the perspective of social partners, research organizations, or national bodies, and we have a macro level volume that is more on the governance and the perspective of ministries. And those 3 volumes are full of examples from different countries on prospective ways of actions, how to improve processes in TVET systems to better meet demand and supply with regard to new qualifications and competencies.
And our third line of work, or the third line of the BUILD project, is what we call the learning line. As I said, turning reflection into action. And here I'm going to share with you a very practical example of what we are doing in this line. So, as Vera mentioned, we developed these 3-volume publications based on the 3 I's approach, or identification, integration, and implementation of new qualifications and competencies. And we are now turning them into a self-reflection tool. We opened a call for expression of interest and selected 9 institutions from Africa, Asia, and Europe to co-develop this tool with us. So the tool aims to assess how prepared TVET institutions are to participate in what we call the 3I process. So we expect that at the end of the piloting phase of the self-reflection tool, institutions become aware of the role they can play, not only in delivering TVET, that's the usual business, but also how better to design curricula that are appealing for the society, and how they can assist the government or the TVET system in general to identify which qualifications and competencies are in need, since they are in the forefront. We want to identify the strengths of these institutions and try to document them in terms of innovation and learning practices, as explained by Vera. But we will also look at the opportunities for improvement that we identify during the process. And for this, we will suggest institutions to develop what we call a new qualifications and competences action plan to tackle a specific point or a specific opportunity to make a better use of their resources. And from the BUILD project perspective, these workshops have the main goal of testing the tool, of seeing how reliable it is, how adherent it is to different institutions in different continents with different characteristics. So this is a process, it's an ongoing process, and it's part, and I mean, one of the main examples of what we are doing in the learning line.
Thank you everyone for your attention. We always enjoy these opportunities to present our project work to you, and please feel invited to join our activities, our diverse activities within the 3 lines. We're always looking for engaged TVET institutions to join us. Thank you.
Thank you for UNESCO, and interesting project for bridging innovation learning in TVET, the belt, and I encourage Egyptian institutions to participate. المؤسسات المختلفة طبعا من المؤسسات التعليم والفني والتدريب المهني. Mr. Katayama, thank you for rejoining, and again, technology has its hiccups from time to time, so please, we just saw the video regarding the BELT project, and we would like to also hear from you about the latest developments and the outcomes of what you have observed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ahmed. I hope you can hear me well better now. So the presentation, the recorded presentation made by our colleague was about the ongoing new initiatives by targeting TVET institutions. But we are also doing a lot of other support by targeting our member states, including the ministries and also the TVET authorities. So as I mentioned earlier, we are now finalizing UNESCO strategy for TVET 2022 to 2029, which will be discussed at the executive board, and we hope that this will be approved by UNESCO executive board soon. So I'm going to briefly talk about how we are going to support our member states under this new TVET strategy. Its subtitle is Transforming TVET for Successful and Just Transition. So we are aiming at addressing the challenges on skills development and TVET in view of the several interlinked elements. And one of them is the recovery, economic recovery, and also the social recovery from this COVID pandemic. And also in some other countries, there are some other challenges, including the ongoing war in the Ukraine, Russia, and also in some other part of the world, there are some conflicts. So we would like to support the recovery from this, recovery from those crises, including the COVID pandemic. And also we are paying attention to the technological changes, the Industry 4.0, and also I heard that some other speakers talked about the digital transformations. I think there is an increasing use of the, not only the ICT, but also the virtual realities, augmented realities, and also the, there are many discussions on metaverse. So we would like to address to this kind of technological changes. And also we would like to pay attention to the informalities. It's still in many of our member countries, the large number of people are employed in the informal sectors, and what kind of training should be provided to support those people, and how we can support their transition from the informal to formal economies, how we can ensure the provision of decent jobs for those people. That's also our interest. And also we would like to pay attention to the demographic transitions. A large number of young people is a challenge in this region, in the MENA regions, but in some other countries, the aging societies is becoming a big problem, including my home country, Japan, and also many other Asian countries. This is a big issue now. And last but not least, supporting the transition to sustainable societies in view of the climate change and etc. So we try to consider all of these interlinked elements, and we set 3 strategic priorities under these new TVET strategies. And one of the first priority is to develop skills for individuals to learn, work, and live, to live throughout their lives. So we would like to take a lifelong learning approach, and we would like to build and establish the flexible learning pathways. So we are not only paying attention to work transition, but also to support the people's transition within their labor market, work to work transition, because many people are changing their jobs throughout their lives and they need some training. And also some people in the labor market, they may come back to the family home and then they may rejoin the labor market. So each individual has its own agenda and its own priorities. So we need that we have to establish the flexible TVET and training systems to respond to the different needs of the individuals. So that's our first priority. And the second priority is to develop the skills for inclusive and sustainable economies. And we have already discussed the digitalization, digital transformation, and also the greening societies. So we'd like to continue to support these inclusive and sustainable economies, especially from the point of view of the digital societies and also the greening societies. UNESCO has just completed the regional support in coordination with the European Commission in these southern Mediterranean regions. And one of our activities was to use the digital competency framework established by the European Commission. And we are supporting some of the countries, including Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine, to develop the self-assessment tools for digital capacities, and also the teacher training system to support this digital transformation in coordination with the French public body called TVET using the EU Digital Competency Framework. So we have produced some materials which can be used for Egypt as well. I think some of them are written in Arabic. So we should be able to continue to provide a digital support for the digital transformation in these regions. And also, one of our ongoing activities is in coordination with the OECD and the CEDEFOP, we are going to develop a tool to support the greening transitions on the work-based learning. So this may also be relevant to the context of Egypt, and we can promote the greening transition of the work-based learning in And the third priority is the development for inclusive and peaceful societies. And particularly, we will be focusing on promoting TVET institutions as a place for social integration and also social cohesion. So these activities will be implemented with the UNESCO International Center of Work. But of course, we should be able to work with the Egyptian TVET institutions under these priorities. And there are some cross-cutting areas, and one of them is the data in order to ensure evidence-based policy making and policy implementation. UNESCO has a statistics institute based in Montreal, but we have systematically collected the information of the education system, but not necessarily on TVET. So we'd like to pay attention to what kind of the existing available data, and not only under the Ministry of Education, but also under the private sectors, and also the Ministry of Labor. And we are trying to integrate all of those existing available data, both qualitative and quantitative, and do the analysis and try to make the informed and evidence-based policy advice to the ministry. So this is something we'd like to further promote strategy. So this is the short explanation of our new strategy for TVET, and we are willing to continue to work with the vision to further improve the TVET system. Thank you very much. I'm here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Katayama. Unfortunately, some of the interventions was not clear, but thank you very much for your time. I got some aspects of your TVET strategy that highlighted, like the sustainable economies, social integration, and the aging societies and the skills needed.